We're here to take a look at Felt's brand new Aero road bike. This is the new for 2020 AR. It's a big revision on the original AR, which was one of the first Aero bikes on the market. This particular model is the highest model available at launch. It's the Ultegra Di2 equipped bike, comes with really nice quality Reynolds AR58 wheels, and as you can see, it's a really fast looking machine. The original AR introduced quite a lot of interesting things into bike design. Lots and lots of big, deep section aero profile tubes. Lots of them borrowed from the kind of time trial scene, which obviously Felt were very, very big in. So they did know a lot about aero, and they brought all that into a much more road ready bike. What Felt also introduced with the original AR was the use of a material called Textream. This branded spread toe carbon fibre is a particular way that the carbon's woven. If you see a frame that's unpainted, the actual material almost looks like a checkerboard. Those fibres are really, really flatly woven together. They're really nicely and smoothly interlaced. With spread toe, you're using less resin, which is heavier. So Felt and Textream will claim that if you're manufacturing with this material, you end up with a stronger, stiffer construction that's also lighter too. It's some clever stuff, and there's a hell of a lot of Textream used within this frame now. There's some really interesting details that have come into the new AR. They've taken a long, long time in developing this bike. It's had a huge amount of CFD and wind tunnel testing, and they've fully changed every element compared to the original AR. If you look at in particular at the tube shape, on the original AR they were much more traditional airfoil shapes, so you had that sort of teardrop shaping, but since then you've seen brands like Trek with KVF, Specialised on the new Venge. Cervelo have been a big purveyor of this, where you're using what they tend to call a camtail profile. So you take that airfoil and you cut the tail off, but by doing this in a particular way, the air is still cheated into thinking that the airfoil is still there, so it still flows as if it would, like over a plane's wing. Nice and smooth, very little turbulence, and that's exactly what Felt have done here on the new AR. If you look at all the major tubes, they've all got this quite nicely cut flat back edge. That's all there just for aero efficiency, and it also helps maintain a much stiffer structure. One of the criticisms of the original AR was it wasn't dynamically the best handling bike. Because it had these big, deep aero section tubes, it could get a little bit flexy, and there was a little bit of deflection everywhere. Fantastic bike in a straight line and blisteringly fast. It's just when you got into the corners and you got into those kind of critical steering situations, there was something a little bit lacking. And Felt claim everything on that has been addressed with this new AR. Also, there's a lot of kind of technical elements on bikes that have changed immensely since that original AR. Disc brakes for one thing, completely taken over everything. So this bike is designed purely for disc brakes. There is no rim brake version. Alongside disc brakes, we've also seen the advent of through axles. Again, that just increases a lot of torsional rigidity in both the frame and the back end. They're really well implemented on this. So unlike quite a lot of their rivals out there, if you look down at the through axles on this bike, they're actually countersunk into the frame. So there is nothing hanging out, there's nothing out there to create any sort of turbulence. You've got a really smooth edge all the way running down this bike. Also, if you go back to the time of the original AR, the biggest tyres that most people will be using for racing would be like a 23C, very rarely moving up to a 25. Obviously a lot's changed since then. 25 has become the norm, and we're seeing a lot of people opting for a 28. So this bike's been designed around bigger tyres. There's an element they've introduced at the back end which they're calling fishtail, and that's where the seat tube cuts around that rear wheel. They've actually opened the radius on that, broadened it out a little bit, and then around the bottom bracket area it's actually got a huge amount of area which then tapers back in towards the back end. And that just gives you much more clearance for wider tyres and the modern trend towards ever wider carbon disc rims. Now, as with any new bike, there's lots of numbers associated with it, so we'll just quickly run through what Felt claim are the advantages of this bike over the previous generation. For sheer aerodynamics, in the wind tunnel testing, they found that this bike is 9.5% faster in a head-on wind in a wind tunnel at a 5-degree yaw angle of wind, so that's a slight crosswind. It's 5.6% quicker. Overall, it's just over 5% faster in all conditions. So in real riding terms, what that means is an energy saving of 10 watts when you're propelling yourself along at 48 kilometers an hour. That's around 30 miles an hour. So in the kind of dynamic, in the handling stakes, Felt claim that this bike is actually 11% laterally stiffer, so that, that's the amount of movement, amount of bending you'll get whenever you're leaning this bike into a corner or when you're out of the saddle sprinting. You break that down into actual sections of the bike. At the front end is where the biggest increases have come. The fork is 21% laterally stiffer, so that's just when you're leaning it into a corner, when you're steering, when you're sprinting, and obviously the increased forces that come from braking from a disc, that needs to be addressed in the fork. So this fork is 15% torsionally stiffer than the old model. Also, under pedaling, you should feel this bike just feels much stiffer, much more controlled, because they've increased bottom bracket stiffness by 14%. So all those numbers, all those increases in stiffness, both laterally and through the BB, may sound like it's going to make the bike much more uncomfortable. So Felt have been really clever in just developing some nice little touches on this bike just to improve the comfort levels, make it more of an all-round experience. The main thing is in the seat post. Now, if you just look at the seat post, they've introduced this big slot running through it, separates the seat post effectively into two halves, and both kind of act like a leaf spring, working independent of each other. Also, alongside this, the seat post actually sits inside a co-molded plastic and rubber section that sits within the seat tube. This again adds a big level of damping, cutting out those high-speed vibrations that you get from rough road surfaces. And Felt claim that at the back end, you're getting actually 112% more deflection through the saddle than you did on the old bike, and that should introduce a whole heap more comfort. Also, whenever you come to any sort of aero bike with this level of integration, as you can see, there are almost no cables on show whatsoever. That can pose some challenges when you want to travel with your bike, when you want to pack it. Here, what Felt have done with this new designed, nicely integrated stem is that the cabling runs internally through the bars into the underside of the stem and then through the bike. But you can actually take the stem off normally, flip it forward, and it doesn't interfere with the cabling whatsoever. There's a nice little section under here which just gives the cables freedom to move, so you can disassemble this bike, get it in your bike bag, chuck it on the plane, nice and easy. So at the moment, the Felt AR range consists of two bikes, of which this is the higher end model. But later this spring, there is going to be a range of even higher models which will have the suffix of FRD. Now, Felt have used FRD for quite a few years now. It means Felt Research and Design, and it's the suffix they put on their bikes at the real high end. So expect to see them with even higher grade wheels, top end group sets, and that'll be at a much higher price point than these ARs, although this isn't a cheap bike at £5,749. Now, obviously, this is just a first look and a short first ride on the new AR. We will have a complete full test coming up very soon as I get a chance to spend a few more miles on this bike. So look out for that full extensive review coming up quite soon on BikeRadar.com. So is the new Felt AR everything you'd be looking for in an aero bike? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.